Hello.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Not too bad, Linda.
That's
Tom
good.
Hartman.
Oh, it's Tom. Hi, Tom.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I didn't know you were on the line.
I thought you were calling. I didn't know how you found out I had a cold, and I thought you were calling and telling me where I can get a flu shot.
There you go. Well, the minister will tell you now shortly.
All right.
You were on the open line this morning speaking with Patty about the budgetary process. And
Well, we're basically the public accounts for 12/13 were filed today, so that was why I was on. And of course, when you're on, you don't know where the conversation is going to go. We discussed a number of things, and we did talk about the budgetary process as well.
Yes, and I understand now. Of course, the public accounts came out yesterday. We're $53 million less than originally forecast in our deficit.
So 63, we're in a better position by 63 million.
63.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. All right, and I understand that. But we still have to borrow. Tell us what that's
Oh, we don't
all
have to
about.
borrow for that year. We don't have to borrow for that year. That was 12/13.
Mm-hmm.
That was last year. And we don't have to borrow for the year we're in now, which is 13/14.
Okay.
What we're saying is that next year, 14/15, when we do the budget, we expect that in the later part of the year that we would have to borrow.
Okay, so what's the reasoning behind that then?
Well, what is going to happen, or what's been happening? Of course, we've had lots of surpluses, and this 12/13. It's the first budget for me where we had a deficit, because I was fortunate enough to be finance minister at a time when revenues were quite robust, and we didn't have deficits. We had surpluses, and therefore we could pay for everything. We not only covered our expenses, the program expenses, but we had money left over that we could use for all the infrastructure that we built. And we built a lot of infrastructure throughout the province, and we paid for it in cash. We didn't have to go to the bank and borrow for it. And when old borrowings would come due, bonds that were taken out by governments 25 or 30 years ago, and they'd come due now, we didn't have to refinance those. We didn't have to borrow. We had cash. We could just simply pay them off. And our investments in Nalcor, for example, in Nalcor Oil and Gas, and in Nalcor for Muskrat Falls, we could make those investments without having to borrow any money. That happened. That was the same thing last year. It's the same thing this year. We don't have to borrow this year. But we think next year, when that we're going to have to use cash on hand. We have about $1.4 billion in the bank. But next year, and this is 14/15, there's going to be some borrowings come due of around $325 million. I'm sorry, $350 million will come due. We're expecting a deficit next year. You'll recall that when the finance minister brought down the budget for this year, a deficit was projected for this year, 13/14, and next year, 14/15, and then we'd go back to surplus. In addition to that, there's going to be, we're going to have to make our equity contributions to Nalcor for Muskrat Falls and for Muskrat Oil and Gas. Nalcor Oil and Gas. And there's infrastructure. We intend to build infrastructure, and that's going to have to be paid for as well. So we'll use cash on hand, we'll use our cash flow, but we'll also borrow some money late in the year to fund our expenditures.
So that's the 1.4 to 1.5 billion you were talking about this morning.
No, the 1.5 billion is the cash we have on hand right now.
Right.
Like at the start of the year, we had 1.9 billion. Mm-hmm. We now have it's between 1.4 and 1.5 billion in cash right now. So for this year, we don't expect to borrow at all for this year. We didn't have to borrow last year. We didn't have to borrow for the last 10 years for operational purposes. It's important that I say that. There was borrowing. We did borrow just under $1 billion at one time to pay down the unfunded pension liability. Mm-hmm. And we did that because by borrowing, we could borrow at a much lower interest than the unfunded pension liability, the discount rate on the unfunded pension liability. So we had a lower interest rate because of that. But for operational purposes, to fund deficits, to build infrastructure, to pay down debt that was coming due from old bond issues, and to invest in, government business enterprises, which is essentially Nalcor and the Liquor Corporation, we have not had to borrow for about 10 years. What I'm saying is that now, next year, at the latter part of next year, we will have to do some borrowing. So we'll use some borrowed funds and we'll use cash on hand to take care of our requirements.
Now, the unfunded pension liabilities, that's a big issue, and some of the unions had been starting to talk a lot tougher there before Christmas. I know the Federation of Labor and NAPE both talking a bit tougher on that issue. How's that process going so far, and what do you anticipate?
Well, I think it's going well. I think what I heard from the unions was that we're willing to work together with government to try to solve the problem that we're facing, which is a problem of the pension plans not being sustainable. We got to fix them. The pension plans provide a very decent retirement for our employees, so it's very important to them, and it's very important to us as the employer. But what's happened is that there's been a change, and everybody knows this, that the problem is that there's been a change in the demographics, in that people are they're retiring earlier and they're living longer, which is a very good thing. It's a wonderful thing that because of better health care and because of better drugs and because people look after themselves better, people are living longer, and that's great. But we have to make sure that the pension it has to last longer, so we have to make sure that we take the steps to make sure that the pension is there for our retirees. Naturally,
I guess the approaches that government would consider would be different than that of the unions, I would imagine.
Well, I think we know it's a mathematical problem. Times are different from what they were when the plans were set up, in terms of people, as I say, retiring early, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. Living longer, that is wonderful, that people can live longer. And I think I read somewhere that for every 10 years that the life expectancy increases by another year, and that's great. But we just got to make sure that that our pension plans are sustainable, so that it's there for the employees when they retire. And the unions, they know this better than I do. They're expert on pensions. I learned about pensions, and as I said, the leaders of our unions, they certainly don't want to be the ones that are there to see the pension funds get into trouble. So we have a problem, and it's a mathematical problem, and we've got to solve it. And we will. I think we will. I think if we work together, I think if we stop trying to blame each other or blame, some government in the past for causing all the problem, and say, look, the heck of who caused it. Let's look at the problem and let's sit down and try to solve it in a reasonable way. And I'm optimistic that we can do that.
Have you set any time frame of when you want this settled, or it'll take as long as it takes?
Well, I met with the unions before I think it was last December 2012, just before I went to Natural Resources, and we had a good sit down, and we said this is the problem. We set up what the problem was, and I said I don't have a solution right now, and I want us to both go back and get our experts, because the unions have access to a lot of expertise in this area as well. And I've, as part of the, we've been supporting the other provinces that have been trying to get enhancements to the Canada Pension Plan. And through that, I've talked to the Secretary-Treasurer of the Canadian Labour Congress, for example, and he's put me on to people that are experts in this area. And I've said, to the unions, you go to your experts, we'll go to our experts, and then let's get together and put our heads together and try to solve this. And then Minister Kennedy, when he took over as finance minister, he was involved with a number of experts. He met with the unions. They had good discussions. And since then, there have been meetings whereby the experts we've hired have been presenting to the unions, sharing information, showing different options to help us deal with this issue. And in February, we're going to get together again and try to, really put together a package that can help us deal with this problem. But we have to deal with it because we're in a situation now where even though, the employees and the employer, the government as employer, have put in, the money that the actuary said we should put into the plan every year, and even though in addition to that, the governments of Newfoundland and Labrador since 1997, the Grimes government and the Williams government and the Dunderdale government have put in $4.5 billion. Just listen to that amount, $4.5 billion in extra special payments, and the unfunded pension ability is still $5.2 billion. It is now our liability to our pension plans is now about 70% of our net debt. So it's a lot of money, and it's continuing to grow every year, and we have to deal with it. We deal with it together. We sit down, and I think as reasonable people, we can solve this.
So you're hoping to put that to bed within this year?
Well, who knows? I mean, I'm going to sit down and talk and reason and hopefully work it out. And we'll see what happens.
All right. Tom Marshall, thanks so much for getting back to us. We really do appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Okay.
Nice speaking to you, Lynn.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Finance Minister Tom Marshall, any thoughts? He says they're hoping to present a package sometime in February on how to deal with the unfunded pension liability. Your thoughts on that, give us a call.